Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. Today's interview is one that I have been thinking about almost daily as I walk and connect to nature. And also, I've been thinking about it as I do some family tree research, which I love to do. And you might be thinking, what? What is Shannon talking about? Isn't this a yoga podcast? It is, and I am so excited to share this conversation with you. Tracee Stanley has been on my podcast guest wish list for a long time, and listening to her, learning from her went beyond any expectation I had for this interview. And this is an interview that's here for you if you are struggling or suffering or dealing with some heavy stuff in life. Just this snippet at the very beginning of the episode, I want you to have a listen to this, will give you some indication of how this is going to help us and then help our communities and our loved ones.
If we know that we can also touch into a place that can be revealed to us through stillness and practice, that to me is very hopeful because it becomes an inner resource that we can always go to kind of shore ourselves up in times of despair, in times of pain, in times of turbulence and uncertainty. That allows us to be buoyed in a way that can also help us to help our community, our families, and just not only ourselves.
Also, connected yoga teachers, I need to take a moment to just feel this immense gratitude to Tracee for not shying away from some tough questions that I threw out immediately at the top of the interview. It was really what was rolling around in my mind, and it was what I was hearing from other yoga teachers. And I did not give her a warning like, hey, we're going to start here. But you can hear that her wisdom and her grace through these questions, it's just astounding how she showed up for these questions. Now, before I get into things further, in case you are new here, brand new to the podcast, let me introduce myself and the podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And this podcast is being recorded on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people who were here on Turtle Island long before my settler ancestors arrived. It's really important for me to continue to learn how to support all of the life that is here on this land through my connection to nature, including all the living things. I'm a Canadian yoga teacher, a mom of 3. Oh, I also need to say happy early birthday to Sage. Not that Sage listens to the podcast, but Sage turns 19 this month. She's the baby of the crow flock, which, by the way, is called a murder. But anyway, that's only for the birders out there. Sage is the baby. When she was born 2 pounds, 11 ounces. She was premature. She was born at 29 weeks. And yeah, Sage doesn't always like me to tell that as part of her story, but as her mom, that really, it makes me just in awe of like the person she's become. She is doing a carpentry apprenticeship right now. I'm immensely proud of the strong, determined, very organized, very like confident person that she is. She cares about people. She cares about the work that she does. And it's amazing to be able to be her mom. So shout out to Sage. Happy early birthday, Sage. I hope we go out and have some fun on your 19th birthday. I know that Sage likes to go to bed early, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm also, if you're new here, I'm also an entrepreneur and a forever student who loves to ask questions. And that's why it feels like the podcast is a really good fit. I love that we get to hang out together, learn together, and interview amazing people like Tracee Stanley. I also want to give a shout out of thank you to OfferingTree. They sponsored today's episode. I use and love this software in my own business because it automates everything from bookings, payments, Zoom links, reminders, and so much more. And we have a podcast listener discount code for you. It's a really good one. That's over at offeringtree.com/Shannon. Today's episode is also brought to you by Pelvic Health Professionals. So, this is a place where if you are a yoga teacher or a movement educator or a healthcare professional and you want to learn the most up-to-date information about pelvic health, check this out. Head on over to pelvichealthprofessionals.com. We have so much in there right now. You can do yoga series. You can learn from pelvic health experts from around the world. We have live calls. We have all the recorded calls. Go and check it out. That's over at pelvichealthprofessionals.com. Okay, so as we get into today's podcast, I want you to know that this podcast originally started almost 7 years ago now. And it started because I know what it feels like as a yoga teacher to be in the real world, graduating yoga teacher training, feeling like you're kind of lost in the jungle of, oh my gosh, I have to not only learn how to run a business, but also continue to learn about yoga. And wow, the world is changing at quite a pace as well. And to keep up with it all, I just thought, how amazing would it be if you could listen to a podcast while you're driving to class or walking your dog or rolling up yoga mats. So thanks so much for being here to hang out with me. Let's dive right in. Tracee Stanley. If you don't already know Tracee, she's the author of Radiant Rest. And also she has a new book out, which we are gifting to one podcast listener, by the way. This book, her new book, is called The Luminous Self, Sacred Yogic Practices and Rituals to Remember Who You Are. The book is amazing. And in order to enter the draw, one podcast listener will win the book and it will be shipped to you. To get into that draw, all you have to do is have a listen to today's episode and then head over to the comment section in the show notes, scroll down to the bottom over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/361 and leave a comment there. Tell us your thoughts, your questions about today's episode. We would love to hear from you, and that will automatically get you in the draw for the book. Tracee also is the founder of Empowered Life Circle, which is a sacred community and portal of practices, rituals, and tantric teachings inspired by her more than 25 years of being a student in the Sri Vidya, Tantra, and the teachings of the Himalayan masters. Now, as a post-lineage teacher, Tracee is devoted to sharing the wisdom of yoga nidra, rest, meditation, self-inquiry, nature as a teacher, and ancestor reverence. Tracee is gifted in illuminating the magic and power found in liminal space and weaving devotion and practice into daily life. Alrighty, let's dive in and meet Tracee. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, Tracee. It's so great to have you here today.
Thank you, Shannon. It is wonderful to be here.
I'm really excited that our listeners get to know you a little bit more. We've heard from a lot of podcast listeners who have enjoyed your book, Radiant Rest, and you just published another book this year. Am I correct?
That's right. Yeah, it just came out on October 10th, and it is called The Luminous Self.
And so we're going to chat about our connection with nature. We're going to chat about, I'm hoping we can talk about how that also helps us in really challenging times, which, you know, it's been that for a few years. It feels like maybe longer for some of our listeners. But before we get into that, tell us, what is the work that you do and who do you do it for?
That's a beautiful question. So I would say that the work that I do is leading people back to the remembrance of their true self. And I do it for anyone who realizes that they have forgotten.
That's amazing. How did you get to this place where this is the work that you do?
I talk about it actually in The Luminous Self, and it was about, in 2001. I had been practicing yoga for quite a while, few years. I came upon the Yoga Sutra 136. And for those who are familiar, it's Vishoka Va Jyotishmati, which translates, and we know that there are many different translations of the Yoga Sutras, but the one that I happen to read talked about this place within us that was beyond all sorrow, that was said to be a light in the heart, that was this effulgent place that was eternal and knowing. And I just remember thinking, wait a second, I don't think the yoga that I'm currently practicing is leading me to this place because no one has ever told me about this before. And that kind of led me to want to deepen my understanding of yogic philosophy, which up until that point had kind of been divorced from the physical yoga practice that I was doing. Nobody was really talking about yoga philosophy. A few little things here and there, but nothing really interesting, or there wasn't like talked about as a path of yoga, right? It was seemed like the only path of yoga was a physical path of yoga. And one of the first teachers that I found after asking around um, said to me in a private, "I'm not sure you've ever tasted your true self." And that was the thing that kind of sent me on this journey of self discovery, and at the same time wanting other people who are practicing yoga and meditation to know that there is this place inside of us that is beyond all sorrow, because the world can be a painful place, as we know. But if we know that we can also touch into a place that can be revealed to us through stillness and practice, that to me is very hopeful because it becomes an inner resource that we can always go to kind of shore ourselves up in times of despair, in times of pain, in times of turbulence and uncertainty. That allows us to be buoyed in a way that can also help us to help our community, our families, and just not only ourselves.
Can you uh, talk to us about um, what's on my mind right now? Is I got this email this week because I had written a long email about my feelings around watching the war that's happening right now in Gaza. And that's a time of immense sorrow. And I got this reply back like, just don't watch the news, just don't look at it, just go inward. To me, this feels like spiritual bypassing. So, how do we, when you're saying that we find this place that's beyond sorrow, I feel like it's probably different than just ignore what's happening in the world.
Well, you can think that you're ignoring what's happening in the world. There is a psychic atmosphere that is really telling us that there is no over there, there is no them. This is happening to all of us in different subtle ways. So there is no looking away. That isn't to say that you don't want to, what was the thing that they told you not to look at the news?
Yeah, just don't
Right?
look at the news, just
Okay.
go
So,
inward.
right. So we need to be able to know what's happening in the world, right? I think we do. For me, I don't think there is any not looking away. I do think that it is really healthy for us to take moments of time for respite and rest, where we can allow our nervous systems to come back to some sort of regulation so that we can have clarity about the action that needs to be taken, right? The understanding of what it is that we're seeing and knowing what that right action is. Um, Going inward, I didn't read the email, but I'm just saying from what you just shared, going inward is a process of going inward, possibly to that place, right? That is beyond all sorrow. But then what happens when you come back out? Do you just stay inward or do you come back out and say, oh, okay, this is how I can help my community? This is how I can help the people who are suffering. This is how I can help the innocent victims that are being, killed every day or held hostage, right? So what I would say is that there is a version of spiritual bypassing, which is I'm just not going to look and I'm going to pretend that everything is light and love. And I'm going to pretend that, it's all good, good vibes only. That definitely doesn't work and it will catch up to you at some point.
And so when you're talking about this, getting to the place of no sorrow, am I getting the wording right?
It's a place that is beyond all sorrow. So what that means really, according to my understanding, and I'm sure there's scholars who could give even better descriptions of what this is really this place that is eternal, that is beyond all conditioning, beyond all environment, beyond all the things that have happened to us, right? It's the place that is beyond name and form, right? So, who is Shannon beyond the body that Shannon is in and beyond the personality that Shannon is wearing as a mask right now? And is that place an eternal place? Yes. According to the teachings, it's eternal. It was there before you had a name. It will be there when you no longer have a body. And not only that, but it is connected to the primordial essence of all that is, which means that we are all connected. We are all part of this eternal light. If somebody across the world is feeling pain and suffering, I'm also feeling it. How conscious or aware I am of the fact that I am feeling it is another conversation, but we're all feeling it.
And then how does a ritual of getting out in nature, how did that come to be on your radar of like, this is one of those things that helps bring me back to myself?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I think that um, one of the things that happens when we want to look away and pretend it's not happening is that we're not acknowledging this idea that we are all connected, right? It's like, I'm over here, I'm separate. Everything in my life is great. I've got my crystals, I've got my, chai or whatever it is, and everything is great. And and the same thing is really happening on a macrocosm because we see the fires, we see the earthquakes, we see the tsunamis, we see the climate shifting. And yet it doesn't seem to affect us if unless it's happening in our own backyard, right? And we are also sensing for most of us, I think, and I'll just speak for the people that I talk to, is that what's happening in nature is completely separate from what's happening within us or to us. So once again, we have this separation, right? We have a lot of people who love to go into nature to feel better. And we know that nature does help us feel better. But that still has this kind of extractive quality from the industrial society of I'm going into nature to take from nature and I'm never giving anything back. My relationship with nature, first of all, isn't a relationship. It's a one-way street.
Right.
And so it means that there's no reciprocity. There's no offering back. And when you get into this place where you decide, and someone who's listening to this right now could just decide to say, I think I want to cultivate a relationship with nature. And I want to stop viewing nature herself as an inanimate object. I want to stop viewing that tree that I love to go and sit under and meditate as an inanimate object. I want to actually start to know that tree as one of my kin.
What are some of the rituals or practices that help us to do that?
Well, there are many, right? But I think that one of the easiest things to do, because, and I say easiest because our American Western mindset always wants something quick and easy, right? The easiest thing and the first thing that I would suggest is for people, if they're going on their walk that they love or to a place in nature that they love, is to greet the place. Greet the place the same way that you would greet a friend. If I saw you walking on a path, I would say, "Hi, Shannon. How are you? How are you feeling? Let's sit down and get to know each other a little bit. We haven't had a chance to sit down in a long time or maybe ever." And really tune into what is it that you sense from the space. Who are the other beings that are connected to this space that are around you? And we can do this very simply by noticing who's around the land that we live on. Who are the other creatures that are there? Who are the other plants and animals and elements that are present? And then just maybe saying a prayer of gratitude. Thank you, for holding me. Thank you for renewing me. Thank you for being here. Send me a message maybe in my dream of how I can help to hold you. And let that just be a conversation that happens between you and the space that you are going to for healing and seeing how you can offer some healing back.
This is really bringing to mind the difference of me in my garden in 2020. So I feel like my nervous system was having a really hard time with the pandemic. And I love to grow food. And I feel like I just went at it like, I'm going to grow food because who knows what's happening in the world type of thing. Like, out of this, like exactly what you said, like more of a taking. And then compared to this year in my garden, I don't know what made me do it. I decided I'd go out and walk through my garden, not doing anything, just noticing.
Mhm.
And it made all the difference in like my garden time, my time outside. And it was more of a conversation. It was more of that relationship of like just noticing what was already happening and asking like how can I help? Like, noticing, oh, wow, this plant is covered in these caterpillars. I'm going to make sure that it's really protected in this area. Like they're doing really well over here. And then really getting to learn more about that. So I appreciate this so much. You articulated something that I feel like I had the feeling, but I didn't know the words for it. Relationship is the great word there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, because you responded. What I'm hearing you say is you responded to what you witnessed, what you noticed,
Yeah.
which is different than the gardener who's like, "Oh my god, there's aphids. I have to start," or
Right.
whatever the
Right.
the thing is, right? It's like or yeah, I mean, a garden, and this thank you for bringing up the garden because growing a garden and being in relationship with that garden, I don't care if it's one tomato plant or one, you know, a few things of kale and chard, that will teach you if you really are interested in the relationship. And it teaches you so much about not only the fact that we are nature, which is the big thing that we have gotten separated from, is this fact that we are nature, but it really connects you to the cycles of life. And if you can begin to see the cycles of life, and yes, you're going to plant a seed or a seedling, and something is going to grow and it's going to give you food or beauty. Maybe it's a flower or it's going to bring medicine. And eventually it's going to go fallow and
Yeah.
maybe die. And maybe it's giving you seeds for the net, and you have to wait. There's a period of time that you're going to have to wait until you can plant those seeds again. And that really, I think, helps us to understand the flow of life, right? Everything is not forever young and always blooming and always on the go, go, go. we actually, as human beings, have to take this respite of rest at some point, whether it's seasonal or whether it's during the day or whether it's because the cycle of the news has carried us to a place where we need to take a moment or a day to rest, or more than 1 or 2 days. But we have to listen. So that responsiveness that you were talking about of walking through the garden and noticing, we have to do that within ourselves, is to notice so that we can give ourselves what it is that we need when it's needed, not waiting until it's too late.
Yeah. We have an exchange student here from Brazil, and she said to me, because it's fall here now, we're going to see snow, and I'm 3 hours north of Toronto. We're going to see like 3 to 6 feet of snow, sometimes. And she said to me, Shannon, what about your garden? What's happening? What will you grow next? And I said, I'm going to be growing snow. She was like, oh, just panicked. And I said, it's just the way it goes. Everything's going to sleep. Some things can overwinter. And it's just this break. It's just this real, we know it's coming.
Right. And instead of resisting, right, which is maybe something she will learn to welcome, because I don't know what the seasons are in Brazil, but I doubt there's any snow.
No, she has seen like a tiny bit of
Right,
frost, I think.
right.
Yeah.
That it's like, oh, can we, instead of resisting this cold, resisting this time of fallowness, can we welcome the beauty that the snow brings and the cold brings? I'm somebody who does not like to be cold.
Me
But
too.
I have learned that the seasons here in Santa Fe, when the winter comes, it's time for me to recede, and it's time for me to really hibernate and rest as much as I can and be near the fire and tell stories with my family and do all the things that the beauty of the season really calls for.
Connected yoga teachers, I'm popping in here for a moment because I want to hear from you. Are you the kind of person who dreads updating their website? Do you lie awake at night wondering if you sent out the wrong Zoom link? Oh my gosh, I hate that feeling. If you're nodding your head right now, you are not alone. And that's why I love to tell yoga teachers about OfferingTree. They're an all-in-one software company with everything you need to run your yoga business. OfferingTree integrates with Zoom. It automatically creates meeting links for any of your live offerings, and everyone who visits your website sees your offerings listed in the correct local time zone. Whatever time zone they are in, that's how they see things show up. It's really cool. And I've worked with the people behind OfferingTree for a few years now, and I can honestly say that they really care and listen to what yoga teachers need. So don't lose any more sleep over your website or Zoom links. If you want your yoga business to be about less stress and more ease, check out OfferingTree. We have a special podcast listener discount code for you over at offeringtree.com/Shannon. That's where you get 50% off the first 3 months. Okay, let's get back into our chat with Tracee Stanley. Something else that caught my eye in your book, which is amazing, by the way,
Thank you.
is connection to our ancestors. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, this is also, I feel like all these things are so connected, to understanding the fullness and the wholeness of who we are, right? Is that our ancestors, first of all, they had their own rituals around the seasons. They had their own rituals around the land that they lived on. They had the foods that they grew, they had the rites of passage. And for most of us, I think that has been lost or forgotten, or we feel that it's not important. And yet, all of the prayers of our ancestors, all of their memories, all of their knowledge is living in our DNA. And it's part of who we are. And our ancestors are constantly, I feel, trying to get our attention in different ways to let us know that they are here supporting us. And anybody who has done ancestor work can probably tell you surprising stories about how the moment that they did something just as simple as creating an ancestor altar for those ancestors who they know are well in spirit, that are elevated ancestors, that they feel have their best interests at heart. So we're not talking about the people who may have caused you harm. We're talking about the people that you know have your back. And that the moment that you kind of create something as simple as an altar, or even an intention in your heart that you want to, again, cultivate a relationship with your ancestors that are well in spirit, then you have to become aware of the synchronicities that may begin to happen. Because those synchronicities are portals. They are portals for you to stop and notice so that you can have deeper information and deeper understanding. And so I think that anybody who's really interested in, I don't know about ancestor work, what does that mean? It sounds kind of scary. Just create an altar with one beloved ancestor. And we also can think about, because there are many people who really don't have ties to their blood lineage due to traumatic events, due to estrangement, due to adoption. There's probably a friend or a mentor or some other beloved who is not blood related that you can bring into your ancestor circle.
I love this. I does this mean also, does it include looking at like way back before we knew these people, like our ancestors who are, we research our family tree, which is really easy to do nowadays online?
Absolutely. So I can share a story with you, which is I created my ancestor altar, and I have very few pictures of ancestors that go beyond great grandmother, right? Especially on my dad's side. I didn't know that there were any photographs that existed. And I have no photos of my grandfather. He died way before I was born, but I do have a ring of his that my dad gave me as a family heirloom. So I decided to place that on my altar. Not too long, and I was also a member of ancestry.com. And I put this intention out that I wanted to connect with the ancestral realm. All of a sudden, I got a phone call from someone who said, "Oh, we're related. I see you on ancestry.com. And I think that one of my relatives was a half brother to your father." And I was like, "No, that's not possible. He didn't have any half brothers." Well, lo and behold, all of the documentation and all of the photos of these twin half brother and sister come forward. And then the story comes forward of how this all came to be. They were older than my dad. And then the next thing I know, I get a call from a relative in Bermuda, and we started talking. This happened during the pandemic. And knew the names of my great grandparents on my dad's side. And she said, "Oh, I have these pictures I need to send you. And these are pictures that are coming from the 1800s."
Wow.
And so then stories just started to come, and there were other messages that started to come in the dream realm that then I could confirm with other family members. So it was almost like this information and these pictures had been around for decades. But once I decided and set that intention, then everything started to come, and a fuller picture of where I came from started to emerge. And things really started to make a lot of sense in different ways. Stories that I had never been told, but that my dad was holding. And then it's like, oh, that's why he wanted me to play the violin, because he had this aunt who played all these different instruments, and my grandmother loved hearing the violin. So it was just an amazing web that continues to unfold. And I've known many people who have, during meditation or yoga nidra or in the dream realm, have gotten messages. I have had students who've gotten recipes, like literal recipes, like ancestral recipes from their ancestors. People who have connected with relatives that they would have no way of knowing that these people existed. And then when they would go back to try to verify, or they would find something on Ancestry because they got a name, received a name, it was confirmed. So this realm is real, and they're here to support and guide us. I truly believe that.
That's amazing. I love doing family trees. um, and one thing that really stuck with me, I was at a workshop and it was about cultural appropriation and yoga. And one thing that really stuck with me is that there was a conversation happening, I think it was after the workshop, about, because I have all European settler ancestors. The conversation was, go look for your settler ancestors and their stories so that you're not trying to grasp on to someone else's culture. And that really stuck with me. I really looked at doing that research a little bit in a different light. And I love this one where I was like looking back at my Irish ancestors. And then just on this one document, it listed a religion which I'd never heard of. And I got looking into it, and it was pretty. I, I'm just going to say, I hope it's not offensive, but it was just like a pretty witchy religion. And I was like, wow, that's giving me a
Yeah.
lot more insight into like why my family had to leave and like move away, and made me feel much more grounded in like
Mm.
the witchiness that I feel in my garden.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there that you just shared, because on the one hand, going back to what we talked about just a little bit ago, that our rituals, our rites of passage, our ancestral foods, most of us have forgotten them,
Yes.
right? And then what happens when we forget, we have this desire to reclaim it, but we don't know where to reclaim it from. So sometimes we can reclaim it from some other culture that we find attractive for whatever reason. And I agree with this idea that that we should also go back and know where we came from, because that knowing is really powerful as well. When we get to see something like what you just shared, um, where I'm going to say the witchiness, I'm assuming was probably something that was really very nature based,
Yes.
which is all of our indigeneity. If we go back to where we are indigenous from, if we can find that, it's all connected to nature. And that's the thing that we've forgotten. The other thing that we might have forgotten that you just shared is that at some level, most likely, most of our ancestors were persecuted at some point and had to leave a place and go to another place. And when we forget that, we lose compassion for other people who are currently in this moment right now being persecuted and having to move to another place.
Yeah.
And so I think that, and that's happening all over the world,
Yes.
right? Um, it allows us to tap into, what maybe I can ask this question to myself of what did it feel like? What did that feel like? Is there a part of me that remembers what that feels like? And is the part of me that remembers what that feels like, does that part of me want to look away? Or does that part of me want to remember, rest in that, and then again ask the question, what can I do?
Right. Is that part of me like getting really angry right now? That was like an experience that I had over the weekend. And it was a mutual friend of ours, Jivana, who said to me, Shannon, anger is okay in this. Like anger. He then wrote a post about it. And I was like, oh, thank you. That's what I need to read. Like yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for our listeners who are, who knows, maybe listening to this a few years down the road, um, what's really top of mind right now is watching the war in Gaza and Israel. Um, can you talk to us about what are some of the rituals that you're doing, Tracee, that are helping right now?
Well, I think for me, it's about coming back to this idea and reminding myself, along with anybody else who happens to be with me or around me, that until all of us are free, none of us are free.
Very
Right.
true.
And so this idea of prayer is very powerful. This idea and practice of meditation for us to be grounded and to be clear about what our skillful action is. And maybe your ritual or your practice today is making an offering or a donation to humanitarian aid, right? Maybe your ritual or practice today is not looking away and reading a story about a specific person or specific family and saying a prayer and lighting a candle. Maybe your practice is going out and, letting your voice be heard if you happen to be somebody who's very educated and skilled in this area. But I can't tell anybody what to do. This is why practice is so important, because practice, when we get still and silent and we rest, gives us the answer of what is ours to do, not somebody else's dharma. What is ours to do?
Well, that's so powerful. I attended this 1 hour training of like nonviolent direct action. Felt really inspired. And then I went and slept on it, was outside walking and thinking. And what I really appreciate about this, it was just a 1 hour thing. There were beautiful people leading it. What I appreciate is they said, we're going to give you a bunch of information, and then it's up to you to decide how you're going to use that information. And at first I was like, well, these people are doing it this way. Maybe I should do it this way. And I thought, that's not really how I'm going to do it. I've, I've, I have an appointment actually tomorrow to sit down with my local MP and just to see where he's at with it. Like instead of marching into his office, doing a sit in, I just want to first have a conversation.
Mhm.
That's my take on it. So I appreciate that so much to know like what can we really do? And it I also want to say from all that you're saying of we're all connected, I think we can have a huge impact even if it's not like directly, with someone in Gaza or directly with a Muslim friend or a Jewish friend right now. I think we can, really connect to someone in our own community and see how can we help them and
At 100%.
yeah,
100%. Yeah. It's again going back to the relationship.
it is. Yeah. How do our listeners find your book? Where
Mm.
do they go to find your book?
Let's see. Well, you can go to my website, which is TraceeStanley.com. Tracee is with 2 E's. And you can find both books there. You can find my previous book, Radiant Rest, and also The Luminous Self.
I think they're both so relevant to what we're in right now. My goodness. Thank you for writing these. Is there anything else that you would like to say to our listeners who are possibly feeling like really tired, really worn out from whatever stuff going on in their own life, stuff going on in the world? Anything that you would share?
Rest. Really practice intentional rest. Pray, meditate, reach out to your friends, and really maybe it's even journaling, doing some free writing around what it is that you are feeling in this moment and what it is that you feel is yours to do. It doesn't have to be big. It really doesn't have to be big, but one little increment of movement in a positive direction can be so helpful.
Thank you so much for this today. I'm excited that we'll link to your books in the show notes, and we'll link to your website and all of the things. Just thank you for the work that you're doing. It's huge right now.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me on, Shannon.
Thank you again, Tracee. As I said, this is one of those episodes that has been just pleasantly like riding along right beside me when I'm out walking, when I've been thinking about different family members and my ancestors, when I am connecting with nature, and also when I've been in times of struggle and very heavy emotions, which has been a lot in the last few months. And so I'm so grateful for this episode. Connected Yoga Teachers, I want to hear from you, not only because as soon as you comment in the show notes, you get entered in the draw to win the book, which, by the way, the show notes are over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/361. I want to hear from you because you get entered in the book draw, but also I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode today. Was this helpful? You know, are you using this in some way? And also, what about the rest of the practices if you've read Tracee's book? So maybe you don't win the book draw, but I would highly, highly recommend checking out this book. You can get it from your local library. If they don't stock it, make sure to ask them to stock it, or purchase one as well. I think this is one of those books that will stay on my shelf for a very long time. And also, this conversation is just, it's with me so often, and it brings a lot of comfort. So I just want to express my gratitude for being here today, all the way to the end of this podcast episode. It means so much. If you are liking this podcast, also share it with another friend or a yoga teacher. Maybe you know someone who's really into doing family trees, or you know someone who really likes to hang out in nature or do yoga. Any of those people you could share this episode with. If you haven't left us a testimonial, please go ahead and do that either in your podcast app, or you can see how you can do that from our website. You can leave a review. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have time to hang out in person, here's what's going on over here. We are wrapping up our Yoga for Pelvic Cancer with Tyla Arneson. It wraps up February the 14th live. You can still join for the very end of this series live, but you can also access the entire series, all of the replays as well. And we have some really exciting calls that we've just previously done and calls that are coming up. So we do live calls, but also we always make sure that the replay is there for you in the library. If you want to access any of this, you can go over to pelvichealthprofessionals.com, join the membership. It kind of works like Netflix. You can sign up for a month, you can jump in there, see all the things that you want to check out and learn from, and then you can cancel at any time as well. So we had a really cool call with Emily Light, where Emily walked us through how she organizes when she's working one-on-one with yoga students, how she organizes all of the notes and their homework. It's amazing. I'm so excited to share this with you. We did it inside of Pelvic Health Professionals because it was a video. So that's in the library now. We also have a call coming up February the 12th where we're going to be talking about fibroids and pelvic health with Dr. Jocelyn Wallace. I'm really excited about that. And in March, Mary is coming in to talk to us about how she has a thriving one-on-one yoga business. And really to break that down with us, you'll hear Mary on the podcast soon. And then also you can ask your own questions. So that's a great thing about the calls inside of Pelvic Health Professionals is you can ask questions and send them in, or you can ask them live. It's really a great way to learn. We pay the guest experts, so you don't have to worry about that at all. And we compile your questions and then you can show up live and hear other questions and learn together in the hour. So all of that is over at pelvichealthprofessionals.com. Next week on the podcast, I'm really excited that you will get to meet Molly Nixon, who started teaching yoga in refugee camps. I cannot wait until you hear her story. I had this idea that it was all going to be like how that works, how we could teach yoga in refugee camps. And I was amazed that there are so many other ways that we can contribute. And also I love how Molly highlighted that many of us are teaching yoga to people who may be refugees and they're in our yoga classes, and sometimes we know and sometimes we have no idea. And then it's the following week that you'll get to hear from Mary Redinger, who, again, like I said, she's going to be talking to us about running a thriving one-on-one yoga business. I'm really excited for you to hear that call. That was one question that we were getting quite often from our Connected Yoga Teacher listeners, like, how do I teach one-on-one yoga? What does that look like? How can I build that business? So we're doing a few more calls. We have some more coming up actually as well. So I'm excited to share those with you. Alrighty, Connected Yoga Teachers, I need to close this out. I have some exciting news as well, some really personal, exciting news. Many of you might know if you're on my email list or if you've been following me on Instagram that we have become a foster family for dogs, rescue dogs, and we got our first rescue dog. Her name is Blizzard, and some exciting news this weekend as I'm recording this for you is that we went ahead and adopted Blizzard and gave her a forever home. We're so, so glad. She's actually lying outside the door of my office right now. We're so grateful to have her here in our home. It wasn't our plan, but she definitely is part of the family now. Everyone's pretty thrilled, including our cat Leo. So that's good that he's also on board and they're respecting each other really well. And even we're lying on the couch together last night. So if you want to see some really cute puppy videos and pictures, I'm sharing that over on my Instagram. That's at The Connected Yoga Teacher. Thank you so much for being here. Also, thank you to our amazing team, Suzanne, Crunch, and Sinead. You make this podcast possible, and I am grateful for the work that you do each and every time I record a podcast. Thank you, dear listener, for not only listening, but also for taking yoga out into the world. I was just talking with a yoga teacher today. Shout out to Betty, who was telling me some of the struggles her yoga students are dealing with and how she's holding space for them in yoga class and how, at the end of the class, they might share what they're dealing with. And she was just saying she is grateful for them to share and also just wants to continue to support them. So sometimes our yoga students tell us their struggles, but oftentimes they don't. And I am just so, so glad that you are sharing yoga in your communities because it makes a big difference. I'm going to close out today's episode with my usual question. What will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?